And now we're going to make some sauerkraut. We're making cranberry orange sauerkraut. So we just have, maybe 2 to 3 cups of cranberries. You can use either fresh or frozen. I've used frozen ones because fresh ones right now are not in the season. We need about 1/4 of a cabbage, some freshly grated orange peel, and we also want some orange sections. So we just start off, and I've thawed my cranberries, put them in the food processor. And then the next thing we'll do, we'll grate the peel, and then you peel your orange, and you want to make sure that there is no white pith showing, and you want to take your orange and section them, but also get rid of the membranes. If you get the membrane, if you include the membrane in your fermentation, what happens is that it creates a bitter taste. So you just basically cut between the membranes and then just sort of coarsely dice them up. And do it over a jar because you want, over a bowl, because you'd like to catch all of the juice that's there. And so that's all there is to do. So here's our bowl of oranges. So first you would just take your cranberries and just pulse them a bit, just to break them up into some chunks. And then we just add the orange peel, the orange pieces, and the peel. And we're going to basically pulse it just enough till it's all blended in together. If you were to use fresh cranberries, it makes a firmer ferment when you're finished, but either way it is delicious. I would serve this instead of cranberry sauce. And so this is what it looks like when it's all pulsed up. So you can see it's quite chunky still, and that way it gives a nice texture to the sauerkraut. The next thing we're going to do is that we've got the cabbage, and it's just a quarter cabbage, and we've just taken the core off of it. And it's just very simply, I like, some recipes call for you don't add the cabbage to this ferment, but I like to add the cabbage because cabbage has so many awesome nutrients in it. It's very high in vitamin C. It's very high in phytochemicals, which are potent antioxidants. It actually protects against various cancers. And it contains a lot of very high in C vitamins, high in many of the essential B vitamins. Essential vitamins would mean that our body can't produce them, and we have to get it from food sources. And so cabbage is one of those places we can get it from. Just want to dice up your cabbage. And let's just see, there's some other things we can talk about here as I'm chopping away. So one of the things that fermentation actually does is that it dramatically increases the vitamin C content of your cabbage. It can actually increase it up to 100%. And vitamin C is a very potent antioxidant which stops free radicals from damaging our cells. And that's what prevents premature aging. It would prevent different diseases like cancers, those type of things. So it's one of the things it does. Some of the things that the lactofermentation also does is that it produces B vitamins. It even produces, it creates B12. B12 is a necessary, essential vitamin that we need to get from animal protein. It doesn't come from vegetables. But because the lactobacillus reuteri bacteria actually create B12, we actually can get B12 from eating fermented foods. There's been some studies done. One was done, a double-blind study published in the British Journal of Nutrition, showed that the bacteria in vegetable ferments brought improvements in depression, anger, hostility, in somatization, and levels that were comparable to or even better than using antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications. And then even a 2012 review showed the bacteria helped with things like asthma, IBS, Crohn's, and inflammatory bowel disease. And because it also increases the enzymes, it really helps with the assimilation and the processing of a lot of the vitamins and the nutrients in the food that we eat. Another advantage of using like wild fermentation that we're doing here, where we're not adding any probiotics, is that you actually end up with a greater diversity of bacteria than if you actually inoculated it with specific types. And also when you take it in the food, this cabbage and this fruit here actually gives both the probiotics from the bacteria, but it also has the prebiotics in it that helps to feed the bacteria when we actually ingest it. So it sort of gives us a double punch. So here's my bowl for mixing. So what I'll do now, I'll just put the cabbage in, just as it is, just diced up. And we take our cranberry mixture, just add it into our bowl. And the next thing we're going to do, we're going to just add some unrefined sea salt. I'm using Himalayan sea salt just because of what I had on hand. You want to make sure that it is an unrefined sea salt, but make sure you read the labels, because often, even if it's unrefined salt, it does still include anti-caking agents, and they would interfere with the growth of the bacteria. When we're doing a ferment like this with a sauerkraut, there's not a specific amount of salt. So basically, I'm just going to add about a teaspoon and a half to start with, about a teaspoon, and I mix it in and I see how it tastes. I want it to taste pleasantly salty rather than being really salty, but you want just to sort of taste the salt, and it should taste just pleasantly salty. Some people describe it as if you want it to taste salty like a potato chip. And you're really getting in there and massaging, especially wanting to massage the salt into the cabbage, because that the salt is what will help the cabbage to release its own liquid, creating the brine. And the same thing with the cranberries and the orange. You can tell I should have let my cranberries thaw a little more. It is very cold in this bowl here. As it ferments, if it sort of ferments for a week or two, the cabbage actually, you don't even see the cabbage anymore. It just becomes red from the cranberries, and it becomes very tender, just like the cranberries. So it becomes this lovely cranberry orange relish. If you want to have it sweet, like you've got cranberry sauce, just add some either xylitol, erythritol, or stevia, or a blend of them, rather than adding sugar or honey or any sweetener that contains sugar. Because the lactic acid bacteria actually take the sugar and they change it to lactic acid. And that makes it more sour the longer it ferments. So let's just see how this is tasting. I say it's a little bit more salt. It's not quite, you don't really taste any salt. You want it to taste just salty. If you put too much salt in, what happens is that it can actually slow down the growth of the lactobacillus, the bacteria, and so then your ferment doesn't work. Sometimes it actually spoils, or it just gets really soggy and soft. What the salt does, two things: it creates the brine. Like, there's far more liquid in here now than there was when I started. So it creates the brine, and it also acts sort of as a preservative while your anaerobic bacteria is growing, because the lactobacillus is actually a preservative. So it's a good way to actually preserve foods, and it stops the pathogenic bacteria and microbes from growing. So I suspect there's enough. I now taste the salt, and it's not too salty. So now you just take it and we just pack it into our jar. If I was at home doing this, I have a funnel with a large bottom that you use for canning, and it makes it really easy for filling jars. And again, you want to pack it in nice and tight so that there are no air pockets, and you can already see that brine beginning to rise up. And you want to pack it in and leave probably a couple inches of headspace in a jar this size. I don't have that much fruit. I needed a jar, but the pint wouldn't have been big enough, so I've got this jar here for right now. And I want to make sure we get all that extra brine poured in. The brine is essential because that's what makes it anaerobic. That's what keeps your little bits in your ferment down beneath the brine. And so we're going to use some cabbage leaves. I've taken some of the tender cabbage leaves. I'll cut the thick vein off the edge. So we're going to use them as what we call the primary followers. We're going to push these leaves down on top of the surface of the ferment to keep all the vegetables beneath the brine. And we're going to use these as our follower. You could use a variety of things. You could use, like I've used in the past, lids. I bought some biodegradable plastic lids, and you can use them. I just cut them to fit. Or you can use, like I'm doing using the cabbage leaf, you could use other leaves. And the idea is to make sure that all the bits stay beneath the brine. One way of thinking it is that beneath the brine, everything's fine. So you can see it's some of these little bits that are floating there. And a piece of the cabbage leaf wants to keep sticking up above, tucking it around the edge. Keep those bits down below. So this is one is called, the first one that sits right on top of the ferment is called our primary follower. And then this jar here will be our secondary follower. And it will just sit down on top, and it makes sure that the vegetables stay beneath the brine. That would be a piece of paper towel, kind of, or one of the claws, right in the corner there. That's it. Here we go. Next thing you have to do before you actually do is to get rid of all these bits that are floating up above the brine level. Because what can happen is that those are the parts that can actually mold. And if they do, just pick them off. And then we just put our secondary follower on top. And then you cover it with the cloth. And this cloth basically keeps out bugs. So this one here to make sure that everything stays beneath the brine. Since this is a fruit and cabbage mixture, the fruit often makes it very lively ferment. You want to make sure you even put it on a plate or a little tray with a lip on it in case it does bubble up over the top of the edge of the jar. This cloth, basically you just tie it on with a twine or elastic band. It's just designed to keep the bugs out. And then probably for a week to 2 weeks, you could set it up on top of your kitchen counter, out of direct sunlight in one of the cooler corners, somewhere between 60 to about 75 degrees, somewhere in that temperature. 60 to 70 is when lacto fermentation works the best. And just every day for the first 2 or 3 days, take a peek and make sure that it's beneath the brine. If you start seeing a bit of foam floating around the top, don't worry about it. That's just from the effervescence of the fermentation. Or even if there's a little bit of yeast kind of growing on it, just remove your jar and scoop that off. Rinse your jar off and put it back down on top, and it will be fine. So let it sit on the counter for a week, and then take everything out, lift your follower out, and smell it. It should smell fresh. It should even have a bit of a tangy smell. You can almost smell the tang of the fermenting. Then lift back your primary follower, your cabbage leaves, and take a clean spoon and just take it out and have a really fine smell. And if it smells good, then just take a taste. Don't swallow it, just taste it. And if it tastes good, then you're ready to go. Thank you very much.